My name is Robert Fastiggi. I was born in New Jersey in May 11, 1926. I went to a little town of Cedar Grove, and I went to Bloomfield High School, and I didn't finish the 8 to 12 years. In the third year, I enlisted in the Navy at age 17. And I went to boot camp up in Great Lakes, and I did my boot camp there. I was even a patrol sergeant, the chief wanted me to be one of the platoon leaders. And I did that, and as when we left, we did our 6 weeks or whatever it was, and that was in January of 1944. I was assigned to a LCI 559 in Norfolk, Virginia. And that's where I met my crew, because the LCI was made in New Jersey, and then went to Norfolk with a small crew, and they took some of us on in Norfolk. And when we were in Norfolk, we left, went out and practiced a few times in runs, and then we went back into Norfolk. And we left, I can't give you the dates, I have them in the book, but we left Norfolk in April of 1944, and we headed south. And they told us nothing more than we were going down to the canal. And we went down through Cape Hatteras. I don't know if you've ever heard they have all those storms in Cape Hatteras, down through the Carolinas. And we went through a terrible storm, and I think everybody but me and a couple other people were not seasick. And I was able to eat most of the ice cream on the boat. So we got down towards Key West, and it was that night, I've forgotten the date of that night, but we had to stop because we were in a minefield. They had to send us out a boat to guide us through into Key West. We were in Key West a few days. I can't remember the amount of days, but I celebrated my 18th birthday there. And then we left Key West, and we went down to the canal zone. And I remember going through the canal. First you go through the big river, getting to the canal. We went through the canal and up to San Diego. And we were in San Diego, and the skipper gave us a liberty. And but there was a group of us together in a hotel in San Diego. They called us, "You got to come back. We're leaving." So we headed back, and one of our guys on our boat didn't make it. He went home, and he never got back in time. So we got from San Diego, we went to Pearl. And I remember when we reached the island of Oahu, that's where Pearl Harbor is, you could see the Diamond Head. We'll never forget that. And when we got to Pearl, we were anchored, first of all, out by where the Arizona was sunk. And we stayed there for a few days, and then they moved us into the base. And from there, at the base, they changed us from a landing craft infantry into an LCG, a gunboat. They took off our ramps, and they installed rocket launchers on both sides of our ship where the ramps used to be, that we could shoot 64 rockets at a time. But we weren't alone. There was 4 other boats in our group, and some were mortar boats and some were rocket boats. And there was 5 of us together. And the 5 of us, we stayed there until it was done, until we took on another 10 crewmen, 2 more officers, and about 10 more enlisted men, because we had more guns. They gave us, we had 3 40-millimeter guns first, one on the bow, one on the gun deck on the starboard side, and one on the port side. And they put 50 caliber machine guns on our well deck and our fantail. And we had 2 more 20 millimeters. And on that one 20 millimeter, I was the gun loader. I wasn't the shooter because those guys came on out in Pearl Harbor. Now, we left Pearl Harbor, I think it was the 11th of September, I believe it was. And we headed out, and the skipper told us we had to make a few different zigzags. We had to go across the 180th meridian. That was the, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but that's the date line. We did that, he told us we did that for only one reason. We had to confuse the Japanese as to where we were going. Because we had to go and do some invading, as they said. We had to do some firing and some shooting. So we headed out of Pearl, and I've got the names of the islands. We went to Enlistment and another island, and we were in Enlistment only one night, and then we shoved off, and we went to, 4 days later, we got into another group of islands where we met up with LSTs and a hospital ship, and we were there for 2 or 3 or 4 days, and we shoved off, and we were heading for the Philippines. Now we got to the Philippines in the middle of the night, and the skipper gave us all a beer. We were entitled to 1 beer and 1 piece of steak. I'll never forget that. And we even had the music. We were dancing each other, a bunch of guys, because tomorrow could have been the last day. We didn't know that. That's why he did that. So we went through the Straits of, I can't give you the name of the strait, but we were going to Leyte. And we were going to the initial invasion was the Dulag Beach. And when we went to Dulag Beach, we started out in our group, 5 of us going side by side, heading into the beach in Dulag. And as we were going in, we were firing our rockets, our 40 millimeters and our 20 millimeters and our strafes. We were strafing everything in front of us. And then as we got towards the beach, we went just so far, we made a U-turn because our assault boats with their troops were right behind us. We made the U-turn, and they kept going in, and we went back, and we were still firing. But there was we didn't see any airplanes that day. But we were in the Leyte. We went to the Tacloban. There was another section, another beachhead. It was Tacloban. It was south of where we were from Dulag in Leyte, in the Philippines. That was October 20, 1944. That was the Liberation Day in the Philippines. While we were down in Tacloban, by the airfield, we were there and we were taking, we had some guys had to go out and swim with the tanks, bring some barrels of oil because we couldn't get into the beach. While we were there, we sounded general quarters, and a plane was coming in from our starboard side, and we turned and we started firing at it, and they cut us off. They secured us because it was one of our own planes. We didn't realize it looked too much like a Japanese Zeke. And from there, we were in the in Leyte Beach until I think I can give you the dates, but there was at the end of November. So we were there for almost 45 days. We saw I don't know how many Japanese planes came down, kamikazes and torpedo planes. And this one morning, every morning we had to be lined up outside of the beachhead because the Japanese used to come over every morning and torpedo planes, and they would come in looking for the bigger ships with their ship, and we had to be waiting for them. And we used to make smoke screens too. This one morning, they sounded general quarters, and I was running up the ladder to get to my gun. And as I got to the top on the gun deck, where I made to go to my gun, the plane went off to the right a little, not the plane, excuse me. The ship started rolling over to the right. And I reached for the railing, I reached for the railing, my head was only about a foot away from the 40 millimeter when it went off. And I went down. It put me down for about 15 minutes. And they woke me up, and my ear was my right ear, and if you look, you'll see I still have my hearing aid in there. And I lost my hearing in my right ear, and I was bleeding, and they woke me up, and I had to go to my gun, it was on the porch side, and I had to go and as a loader. So that went on, and then while we were there, we had every morning, from morning until night, the Japanese planes came, and they never stopped. And it was hot as hell down there in the Philippines. And I remember we were on that deck, they wouldn't let us secure 100%. We couldn't go below deck. They used to bring us food and water up. And we had to stay by our guns until night. And that happened, we did that. We did that in, I think, 45 days, the skipper told us. And then he shoved us off because we were going to go now get a rest camp. Well, we headed for Australia. And that was where we were going to go to rest camp. But on our way, the skipper says, sorry, we can't go that far. We're going to go to the island of Hollandia, New Guinea, the island of New Guinea that was in the Indian Ocean. So we were there until Christmas Eve. And we left there, I think it was Christmas Eve, and just before the 30th of December. Then the next day, now we're into 1945. So we headed from there. We were going to go to the island of Luzon, to Lingayen Gulf. And I can't give you the exact, but there was 5 different seas that we had to go through around all the islands to get to Luzon. Sulu Sea, like 5 different seas. But as we were passing Manila, the capital of the Philippines, as we passed them, the Japanese sent out 2 bombers. They come in, they would drop bombs, but they missed us. And we shot down one of them. And they made a retreat. And we kept going to Lingayen. We got to Lingayen, the dates are in my logbook. But when we got there, I think it was January 9th, something like that. And we met up with the destroyers and the underwater demolition. The underwater demolition crew, these was us divers, Navy divers. And we had to protect them. They went in close to the beach and we were right there next to them. Now we stayed with them until they cleared the beaches of the debris that was in there so our troops could get in. And we made our U-turn and we went back out. And that night, the Japanese had suicide swimmers, so we always had to stay by our guns all night long. And we did shoot one down. One of the boats, we took one boat down, and one of the Japanese swimmers came towards us, and we tried to take him aboard, but he took off he had a vest on, he took it off, and he went underneath our propellers, and he killed himself. And that was then. I don't know then. After that, we did the initial invasion of the Lingayen Gulf. And we stayed there. I can't remember exactly. The dates are on my logbook. But we stayed in the Lingayen Gulf, and we left Lingayen Gulf. We went back to Leyte. Now we were in Leyte. I can't give you a date until sometime maybe in March. And from there we headed for Iwo Jima. We were on our way to Iwo Jima with our crew, with the other 4 boats in our group. And we were on our way, one of our engines broke down. So they towed us back to Leyte. We couldn't get to Iwo. So we went back to Leyte, and we stayed there until they were ready to go to Okinawa. Now we left for Okinawa. It was in April. Can't give it a date there. We were there in April, and we were there in April, and until we were in Okinawa until I think it was July, the end of July. But while we were at Okinawa, we had the initial invasion of the main island of Okinawa was on Easter Sunday that year, 1945. And between that, there was a lot of other islands that we had to go and with underwater demolition crews. So we had to fly around the beaches all the way around and let our guys get on the beaches. I think there was 5 more islands that we had to shoot on. And while we were there, our radio operator received a call that Ernie Pyle, the reporter that used to be writing for against the, he was in Europe, and then where Europe war was over, he came to the Pacific. But he was machine gunned down on a little island that we were patrolling between Okinawa. And I can't give you the figures, but the skipper gave us a list of the amount of planes. We got credit for knocking down 3 Japanese planes, and we assisted in many more. And he also gave us a list of the amount of planes that we saw, the amount of kamikazes we saw. And it was in the hundreds that we said Okinawa was, we weren't that far away from Japan. And we knew when they were taking off, we knew when they would be there. So we were waiting for them, and all they did was come down, and I don't know how many planes they crash dived. One missed us by about maybe 25 yards. And we actually saw his face, the pilot, when he went into the water. And while we were there at the Camaretta, that's where we had to go for food. And one of the new destroyers had the whole bow taken off by kamikaze. And I can remember another destroyer that was us. A Japanese swimmer tried to get aboard, and one of their men came out and shot him in the head. I saw him go down. But while we were there, one night, we sank a boat coming from that small island into Okinawa, and we took on 9 prisoners. We had 9 Jap prisoners on our boat for a whole night. And we took them back to the Camaretta where all the larger ships were, and we turned them over. So that was it. And then after that, I think it was July 25th when we left Okinawa, heading back to Pearl to get ready to go to Japan, to invade Japan. So on the way back to Pearl, we went through Saipan, Guam, and then Wilcox. We stopped at Saipan, and we put a crew ashore to get us some food because we had no food, we had no water, and he brought the food in. So we got back to Pearl, and we went into dry dock. When we were in dry dock, August the 15th, 1945, is when the war ended. And we were there in dry dock. They took us off, and they put us into a rest camp. And when they put us in the rest camp, they gave us a little liberty. And I went on liberty to the other side of the island. It was a huge, beautiful, and when we got to the other side of the island, the waves were so high. I don't know if they've seen this, but they have a lot of big people that go do those waves on the ship boards. And while we were there, I went in the water, which was a mistake. Because when they took me out, they put me in the clinic because of my right ear, because I was bleeding bad. And, but that was it. They had, that clinic had my records, and that clinic burned down and my records were lost. So there was no records about me being injured with my right ear. And so we left, we left when we left Pearl Harbor to come back to the States. We came back on an aircraft carrier. And there was the whole hangar deck was full of cots, and that was us. And we went through a heavy storm coming back, because we were up on the deck, because that was a big ship like that was nothing compared to what we were on in that little boat we were on, 125 feet long with a flat bottom. But we got back to Pearl in October, and we stayed overnight there. We stayed there for I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it was, and we left to come back to the States. So we got back to the States in October, and we headed home to wherever our homes were. And then I stayed, after my liberty there, they sent me to Boston, Massachusetts, and put me on the battleship New Mexico. And that's where I finished my military career. And then on May 6, 1946, I was discharged at Leyte Beach, Leyte Beach in Long Island. And that was the story of my career in the Navy.
Into the Philippines. When you fired off the rockets, describe for me the sounds, the experiences, the water, the motionness. Describe all of that experience, if you will.
Okay, when you're firing your rockets, you hear a lot of swishing, but you don't really hear any of the noise because we don't get that close to the beach. But you could see the rockets going off, 64 rockets going off, and it wasn't just from us. There was a ship, our boats on both sides of us. One was a mortar, one was a rocket. And as we're going in, we're firing as we're going in, big. But with no planes, no Japanese planes came. We weren't fired upon from the beach. They had already gone back. We heard later that a lot of them, the Japanese had dug potholes. And they were waiting for our troops to go by them, which we found out was true. As the troops went by them, they came out of these potholes and they were shooting at our troops in the back. That's the story we got. Now, how many times I can describe the sound of the 40 millimeters going off, the 50 millimeters going off. I tell you, we went through air raids every day for 45 days. And you get so used to hearing the noise that there's nothing different. And because when we went into Lingayen Gulf and the Luzon Island, it was the same as it was on Dulag Beach in Leyte. And we went into Okinawa on every one of those beaches firing our rockets and our other guns. It was the same thing. But you got to remember, every time we went to the beach, the boats with our troops on were right behind us. As soon as we got as far as we could go, they were catching up to us, and we had to make a U-turn and come back. Every one of the beaches was done the same way. We worked with underwater demolition on 5 of the beaches that we had to go to. And without us, those underwater demolition crews, they would have been in big trouble. We were fortunate on our boat. I was the only one that really got hurt. And nobody else on our boat got hurt at all. On the other boats, they had some injuries. I don't remember how many and how, because they were in their boat. We had one doctor that took care of our 4 boats. He flew in from the States in Leyte. And he wanted to be he wanted to go through to become a shellback from a polywog. And he was told, no way, because you have to come by ship and go through the whole rig to get it. So, but the Japanese kamikazes, I can't tell you how many I saw. All I know is at Okinawa, there were more kamikazes at Okinawa than anywhere else, because that was the last thing for the Japanese, because they could leave and be with us in 15 minutes from Japan. And most of those planes that come over us were kamikazes. Now, we were busy fighting those coming close to us. The skipper is the one that made gave the figures. You'll see them in my log. Hundreds of kamikazes, hundreds of Japanese planes that we came in contact with. And they were like flies. You could look up at the sky and all you saw was airplanes that looked like flies, and they came down one after the other, coming down at our ships. How many got hit? I don't really know. I know that one of that destroyer that took the bow off, and that took the bow off from the bridge right on forward. We had the typhoon out there, and in Leyte. And the typhoon we had when we were at Leyte, we had to leave Leyte Bay to go out into the ocean, because they told us to get out of there because the typhoon was there. The typhoon could put us all up on the beach. And we came back, there was one ship on the beach. Yep, we took it right off to the side. And our main task force of ships, the larger ships that were out in the typhoon, They were, I think it was Halsey, the Admiral Halsey. I believe it was him. He and the Japanese fleets were getting just, they were changing course because they were trying to avoid each other. If it hadn't been that the Japanese made the mistake, they thought they were going to meet up with the American fleet, they could have wiped us all out. They never got to Leyte. They made a U-turn and went back up towards Japan. So we could go on, but all I can tell you is that the days on Easter Sunday, when we made the initial vote, and it was so cold, it was snowing. This was Easter Sunday in 1945. And we didn't have any heat. And I had my uniform, my blue uniform. I told you I had to wear that because we had no clothes. But that's all I can tell you about that. And of course, food. We had no food to eat. The water. The only time we got a shower in good water was when we just left another big boat that gave us some water, because otherwise it was salt water showers all the time. We had a good crew. As I said, there must have been a total of us of 40 on the whole boat. We didn't come in contact with the Japanese until they came out of those kamikazes. We never got ashore. The only time I got ashore was when we went to New Guinea, and then I was back in Pearl because of my ear, because I couldn't go in the water. But we never ran into any Japanese on the island of New Guinea. We weren't permitted to leave the boat because there were two headhunters out there. So we weren't able to leave. But I remember when we pulled into Hollandia, New Guinea, they came alongside of us in their little boats. There's pictures of them in my album. But most of them were nothing but sores and sores and sores and bare breasts and bare bodies. And but we were there in the New Guinea, the island, Hollandia, New Guinea. They had that was where they used to bring all our mail. And I can remember when we pulled in here, you could see the stacks of mail of two stories high. And then they had to deliver it to the different ships or boats all over the Pacific. And my mother sent me a gift for Christmas. And that's where I received it. It was just before Christmas Day that I got it. She sent me a bottle of whiskey because she didn't like me to drink anyway. But they had the big cans of olive oil, and it was metal. She had taken the olive oil out, and she had put the bottle in that with lots of to keep it from breaking. And so me and a couple other guys, we had that drink. We left on the 30th of December. So we sat there as the boat was leaving New Guinea. We sat there, we drank and got half stoned. But why not? But that was sudden. But we never, but that's about all I can remember about New Guinea, because we couldn't go off the base really. And as far as in Leyte, the Filipinos came alongside of us, and the little kids came aboard, and all they wanted was candy and cigarettes. And our guys used to give them their cigarettes, because we all had cigarettes. It was only 50 cents a carton, and we all smoked. Today, that's another story, but a lot of people still smoke. But if you look back to the guys that were in the military, everyone had a cigarette in their mouth. And now they say they can't smoke because everybody's going to get cancer. But that's another story. But then, as they say, we never went ashore in Luzon and Lingayen. We never got ashore. We never got ashore in Okinawa. The only time we got back ashore was when we left Okinawa. We went at Saipan and we got food. Otherwise, we never got ashore. It just didn't happen in our group. The Navy, when you're in the Navy, you're in the Navy to stay aboard ship. So that's what I did.
I wasn't sure. I'm going to hit on this one last. I wasn't sure if there's any feelings that you guys had, emotions that, against the Japanese or about the war itself that you'd like to share.
Well, here I was only 17 years old. Now, we did have some guys that were older, and they were drafted, because I enlisted. But we had some 32-year-olds, and they taught me how to lose money playing poker. And we discussed that, and I can remember crying on Christmas Eve. Tears come when Bing Crosby was singing Dreaming of a White Christmas. Still brings tears to my eyes. But the Filipinos were nice people. And, but we only saw those one time when they came alongside of us in Leyte. We never saw any more Filipinos. We never got ashore. The only Japanese I saw, as I told you, we saw a couple of dead ones. And that's the way they should be when we were fighting them. We saw a lot of Japanese bodies. Most of them were from the kamikaze planes. They came out and they got killed. Other than that, we weren't ashore, so we didn't go fighting the Japanese on land. That was up to the military, the Army and the Marines. Other than that, I can't tell you any more than that. And other than it was lonely. Life was lonely. I remember lying in the sack at night, and we had our breaks. That's about it. It was no fun.
Describe for me what you feel after being in that. What did you feel about the war at that time? You know, I mean, what were your feelings about it? You know, did you have the emotion of excitement? Was it scary? Was it that kind of thing?
Well, it wasn't. It was scary, and it was scary 24 hours a day. It was something like that. Every time you turned around, there was sun in general quarters. I tell you, at the Leyte, we were there for 45 days under nothing but airplanes and coming off the beach, coming torpedo planes, and then we were at Okinawa. All it was Japanese airplanes. We didn't see troops, but we saw the airplanes and the flyers, and we could go on and on and on. And fortunately, I was the only one that got hurt on our boat, and I wasn't shot, but the gun knocked my ear out, and if it wasn't for that, I just couldn't. When we got back to New Jersey, I went to the VA down in Newark, New Jersey, and I told him about my ear, and he said, "There's nothing in your records." So I went through almost my whole life after getting discharged. That they didn't. I finally got a permission to go to the VA for assistance, but they never put it down on my records that my ear. Because even when I was a police officer and I was on the scuba team, the doctor says I had to quit. He says, because you're going to go down, and you're not going to know up from down or side to side. And every time I put my scuba gear on, my ear used to bleed right into the mask. That's that. We could go on. No, I don't know what else to tell you. Okay. But other than the fact that it was a daily routine that was Japanese airplanes, Japanese suicide swimmers, Japanese suicide boats. There was no stopping it. It was a 24-hour day. Everything day, it was 24 hours. If we slept 2 hours, we were lucky, because it was general quarters. We were always under general quarters. In Leyte, in Luzon, Okinawa. If you go back to October 20, 1944 till July 25, 1945, that was nothing but, and except that little piece of action we got to New Guinea. But otherwise, it was nothing but Japanese planes, Japanese swimmers, Japanese boats, and it would happen all the time. There was never any stopping it. I told you, we had to. They used to bring us the food and the water, so we had to stay by our guns. That's how often the Japanese planes were there.
I'm going to ask a personal question if you don't want to answer it by all means. After the war, when you came back, did you ever have nightmares or anything about anything? Did you ever have an increase in that type of thing? If you don't want to talk about it, that's totally fine. But
the one was I practically lost sight of everything after November 8, 1945. Other than when I got aboard the battleship New Mexico, and I stayed there until May 6th of 1946. But that's about all I can talk about. It's a long time ago. Okay.
I ask these questions because it's very significant to understand what you experienced. And I appreciate you for bearing with me on all these questions. I know that some of them are difficult. I'm not trying to push too hard, but I do appreciate it because you're conveying your story to us. And when I say us, I mean anybody who watches this in the future. So I want to kind of talk about VJ Day and what you felt on that day. What was it like August 15th or so in Pearl Harbor? What was it like, the emotions that you had when you knew the war was finally over?
August 15th, when the war was over? Well, I tell you that August 15th, when the war was over, we were in dry dock. And that's when they took us off our boat. There was only a few guys left on it. All the rest of us were taken off. And as I told you, we went to they call it the RS stations, receiving stations, and we stayed there. And while we were there, that's a bunch of guys, all kids and a little older, and waiting for to tell us when we were going back to the States. And while we were there, we all got a little liberty. I told you we went to the other island, the other side of the island, where I had to go to the clinic because I went swimming. But otherwise, it was nothing more than hanging around, smoking cigarettes. I quit smoking, not because I was afraid of cancer, just that I couldn't take it anymore. But I still think it's against the law. They shouldn't tell you you can't smoke. That's their business. It's an individual thing. And well, that's about it. It was the coming back on the carrier. The carrier went through some bad weather. We got back to California. We went through the Golden Gate Bridge. Nobody said hello, other than put us into a place overnight that we had no heat, no food, and stayed there until we came back to we were on a train coming back to the different. When we left California, the whole train was full of military people coming back to wherever they were going. They stopped off here, stopped off there. The group of guys that I was with, they said, let's stop in Chicago. We're going to have a party. He said, what the hell? We earned it. I said, no. I said, I can't. I got to go home. This was the beginning of November of 1945. And so they said, no, we're going to go. I said, well, sorry, have a good time. And then I had to, when I got off, see, where I lived in a little town of Cedar Grove, New Jersey, there was the only way I could, when we got off in Newark, New Jersey, I think, off the train, and we had to take a bus. There was nobody to pick me up. We had to take a bus back to Cedar Grove, New Jersey, and I got off the bus for Stevens Avenue, New Jersey. Never forget that. And I walked down Stevens Avenue to little 1139 Pompton Avenue, Cedar Grove, where I grew up. And that was about the size of it. And then my oldest brother met me. I met him. My older brother Mike. He was 6 years older than me, and I went to where he was working, and he come running down the hill. I'll never forget that day. And he slid down and he hugged and he gave me a kiss. After I got out of the war, after I got discharged, I met a beautiful girl, my wife, Billy. It was a blind date. My one brother's, he was in the military in Europe. He was on a ship. He was the bolt-on turner on a four-engine plane, and he married his wife introduced me to my wife. We went sleigh riding the first night. That was in Cedar Grove, New Jersey. It's a long time ago. And she was 20 and I was 20. And we waited until we were 21 and we got married. And then we stayed together and had 3 kids. And then she was a heavy smoker. I begged her to quit. She wouldn't quit, and she died of cancer. And other than that, so I got 2 kids left. One's gone. And that's, well, I don't know what to tell you anymore.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much.
I'll tell you, I remember when I left high school, one of the reasons I left high school, because I was a football player. And I was in my 2nd year, and we were practicing, and this kid, his name was Maffei. He tackled me and he pulled my left ankle, and he almost broke it off, because he thought I was going to be the quarterback, and he wanted to be the quarterback. And I'll never forget Eugene Maffei. I'll never forget that name. And I couldn't walk, and I didn't go back to school in my 3rd year, and because that's when we used to have lunch in the cafeteria at Bloomfield High School in New Jersey, and one by one the guys were leaving. They were enlisting in the Navy. So I said, I'm going to go. So I said to my mother, I want to go in the Navy. My mother says, you're only 17. She goes, you go to school. I said, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to work. I want to go to the Navy. She says, if you promise not to go in the submarines, I'll let your father sign the papers. So my father signed me in. And I left New York in January 1944, went in the Navy. That's the story of my life. That's it.
If you had to talk about the war, if you had to talk about war in general, but World War II, what would you say?
About World War II?
Well, I mean, being in the war, having experienced one and seeing.
Well, it was strange. Who at age 17 knew what the war was going to be? You read about it, because my brother was ball turret gunner, and he was in Europe, and this was before I went in. He was in there. He was drafted into the service, but he was in Europe, and I went into the service, and then all the time he was in Europe, and I was in the Pacific. He was writing to me, and I wrote to him. And I still have the letters. I still have the letters, and he has I don't know, his son has my letters. But we talked all the time, and my older brother, the one that, he wrote to me all the time, and he always told me all about everything. And I had a little girlfriend way back then, before I went into service. I'll never forget her name. It was Peggy Morrow. And here she was a couple of years older than I, but we dated. But hell, I got my driver's license, so I could take her on a date. I can remember, that's a long time, and she was a good dancer. And I was always a dancer from the time I grew up. I was a dancer. I loved to dance. I still do. But my wife was a good dancer, because my wife and I could dance all the time. And my brother Mike, the one that I told you about, he taught me really how to dance when I was only a little 12, 13-year-old boy. But no, I had a good life. I went through the Depression days, because I remember wearing knickers. I remember I had nothing but knickers, and my shoes didn't have any soles in them. You know, you had to put cardboard in back in the Depression days. And yeah, I remember those days. I had a bicycle, didn't have any tires on them. But that little house in Cedar Grove, New Jersey, that we had, my father had some goats. He had 15 acres of ground. And my mother used to go out in the field and pick up the dandelions. Yeah, I remember those days well. And then when I left the grade school to go to middle school in Bloomfield, New Jersey, and then into high school, I became the president of the class. And my principal in the old school, in the grade school, he said, "That's our Robert Fastiggi." Yeah. When I was in high school, they used to have the dancers in the gym. And all the guys would be on one side of the gym, and the other girls would be on the other side of the gym. And Robert was the only one that would go and get a girl because he was a dancer. The rest of the guys never danced. And I danced, and I still do. That's about it. I could want to tell you so much of my young life, but the war life, as far as the war goes, my brother was gone. He was in the war. And I went to war, but I didn't know anything about it. But the guys were going to war. You had to go take care of the country. The war was a world war, and you had to go do your thing. But I never got a stripe. So all I did was be a seaman first class. But that's okay. It's done deal.
Things, but if you want to tell me about that, I would love to hear it.
Okay, let me tell you the back. I can start with the fact that I was born in Montclair, New Jersey, or Glen Ridge. They call it Glen Ridge, because Glen Ridge, the maternity ward was actually in Glen Ridge, but the hospital was in Montclair, New Jersey. So I could have 2 birth certificates, both in Essex County, and I've used them both. But I was born on May 11th, 1926, in Mountainside Hospital, Montclair, New Jersey. And we lived at 52 Chestnut Street in Montclair. And it was a nice neighborhood. And I went to grammar school in Montclair, I forget the name was Grand School. But I came down with double pneumonia, and I was in first grade, and I never finished the first grade. And and then my father was in business, and he lost his business. So he had already bought this piece of property in Cedar Grove, New Jersey, and it was a little farmhouse. And he moved us out of Montclair to the farmhouse in Cedar Grove because he had a mortgage and because it was a farm. And they let him stay with ours, however he was making his money. But this was the WPA days. And so while we were in Montclair, and I was this age, I can remember smoking cigarettes. I was only 5, 6 years old. And we could go down the street to this little store and buy them a penny a piece. It's a true fact. And we used to smoke these cigarettes. And we used to walk down the streets together. And I can remember one day my father came out on the street, and I was talking to some friends, and I swore at him. And he slapped me. That's the only time my father in all the years ever hit me. And I deserved it. Because I think I called him a son of a bitch or something. I was a 5-year-old kid, right? But this is true. This is a true story. And then we went to Cedar Grove, and I went to the first grade. And my father came down and put us in school. Now, my little sister Laura, she's 2 years younger than I. She was in the first grade too, because he didn't say anything about kindergarten for her, but they put her in the first grade. And they put me in the first grade too. So here I am with my little sisters, 2 years younger than I, in the first grade. And we stayed together right through where I left. I went into service in high school. Now, we used to have to take a school bus from Cedar Grove to Bloomfield every day. And every day my sister would help me do my homework. It's a fact. And, she helped me, and we went through. Of course, she was a very bright girl, and but that was my little sister Laura, and when I did very well. I took up the trombone in grammar school, and then when we got to high school, I wanted to play football, so I had to get rid of I wanted to get out of the band, so all I did was I gave my guitar trombone to my other brother. So I don't know, but I asked him sometime later, he still had it. But that's a long time ago. But so then I went into service, and my sister Laura, she graduated. My other little brother, younger brother, he graduated. He went to college. My sister went to college. And then my little sister was, she had a little problem mentally, but she's in college. In college, she had a problem in college mentally, and I tell you that November 8th, 1945, she was in college, and I had to go get her out. After that, she was always my little sister, and she started dating some guy. And my sister was riding home one night in Verona, New Jersey, when this guy was just left the Meadowbrook, New Jersey, which was a restaurant, went through a red light and hit her and put her in the hospital. And I was in a police department then, but she was in the hospital, and I used to go down there almost every midnight. When I was on the midnight shift, I would go down to see her. She was in the hospital for months and months, and she had this boyfriend, didn't want her anymore because now she was an invalid, and her life wasn't a happy one. And so one time, when I was a police officer in Hampton Lakes, New Jersey, and she stopped at my house, and that afternoon with me and my wife, I said, Laura, stay for dinner with us. She said, no, I have to go home. I said, that's only up the road. I said, you can get home in a little while, but have dinner with us. She said, no. So she went back to her house, and she left a message, and she committed suicide that night. My little sister. So life hasn't been 100%. I had a good wife, I got some good kids, and good family, good mother, good father, brothers and sisters. But our family never hurt anybody else. But we got hurt. I can't tell you any more, Matthew.
So, let me ask you this, all right? It's cold in New Jersey right now.
That's what I hear.
I've been here in Florida my whole life. So why'd you come to Florida?
The truth of the matter was that I was in the police department. And this dispatcher we had, a female dispatcher, she said she had come to Florida, and she bought a house in Florida. And she said the prices were right. So I said to my wife, I said, well, she was coming down here because her nephew had an accident on a motorcycle. She wanted to come down and see him. I said, well, when you're going down there, stop and look where Culligan has a house and see what they say. So she came down and she looked around, and she called me up. She said, I bought a house. And I said, you bought a house? I said, yep. And so we went through the whole 9 yards, and that's just what she wanted. And so the house, it was about 2 years before I retired. So then when I retired, we sold our house in New Jersey. and we came to Florida. That was in, I can't even remember the date now. But that, well, in 1981, we moved to Florida. That's when I retired from the police department. And of course, I was only 55, because you had to be 55 and 25 years of service at that time to retire from the police department. So I got to Florida, and here I was 55, and I started driving a school bus in Florida. That didn't work. It was okay, but it wasn't my cup of tea. I even had my pilot's license. I still had a pilot. I got my pilot's license on single aircraft when I got out of service. I still have it. I still have a plane. I still can fly a plane, but I haven't been in for a few years. And now I'm 88 years old, and the doctor says don't fly anymore. But anyway, we came to Florida, and I had to go back to work because my pension wasn't large enough to live on. So I went back to New Jersey every summer, and I worked out of the operating engineers local, 825, and I was making good money. And the money I was making, my wife and I, when I came back to Florida, I came back to Florida every winter, but I saved a lot of money, and I wasn't doing badly because I had that, and I had the pension from the police department, which was minor, because when I retired from the police department in '81, we were in a recession. The country was in a terrible recession, so we weren't getting any raises. So I retired on $14,000 a year. That's all I was getting as a lieutenant. See? And so I had to go to work. And so when I went to work, I was making good money as an operating engineer, because New Jersey was doing a lot of building. So I was able to save a lot of money. So when I got to be 65 and into Social Security, my wife and I traveled. Now I was 65 years old, but we were traveling. We went to Alaska. She had a brother there. We went to Italy, Ireland. My wife was Irish, because she could have joined the Daughters of the American Revolution. But we went to Ireland, and we found out where her family came from. And we went to Italy, and I found out where my family came from. Even the little town where my father was born. He was born in 1889 in Calitri, Italy. And I still have one first cousin in Italy. All the rest are dead. And he's Michele Fastiggi. He's 2 years younger than I am. So I'm 88, and he's 86. And but we visited them. They took us up. We lived there. We traveled. We visited them. And my wife and I traveled the United States. If she had stayed alive, we'd still be traveling. So I didn't have a bad life after retiring from the police department, because the guy that got my lieutenant's bars, he retired on, I retired on $14,000, he retired on $65,000. That's the story of life. That's about it. Any farther, and it's enough. But I was a dancer, and I was always a Johnny Walker Scotch drinker. I still am. When I'm home, I don't drink and drive.